Used to be called alcoholism. Now it's called alcohol abuse syndrome.
They're drunks. Let's just call a spade a spade. They're drunks. Both of them. I'm going to hide you, and you're going to seek for your last breath.
You should probably shut the up. Sarah. Shh. Is the last thing you will hear the defendant say to Mr. Torres.
You should probably shut up. Shh.
As he is face down, zipped shut in a suitcase.
These are bad facts. They are just and they're unarguable facts because they're on video.
Sarah. The defendant laughs again. Sarah, I can't breathe, babe. She laughs again. That's on you. Sarah, I can't breathe. She laughs.
Sarah.
That's my name. Don't wear it up.
Sarah, I can't breathe, babe. Seriously.
Yeah, that's when you do when you choke me.
Sarah.
I mean, and this is effective because he's going through this recording, and it is just so cold of her.
She laughs again.
Michael, can we roll the clip from my cousin Vinny in his opening statement?
Everything that guy just said is bull. Thank you.
All right, so that's not an opening statement. They do things in that movie that we would just love to do, but the movie's more realistic than you think it is. When the prosecutor objected, he objected because it's argument. But the idea of an opening statement is to showcase what you think as the lawyer the evidence is going to show.
Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And what he do? And it's gonna react to all the self-snitching.
Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of Criminal Lawyer React. This is a special edition. Special edition where the content geniuses decided what we're going to do today is get some popcorn, maybe a glass of wine or something, and it's not going to be terribly long, but we're going to watch the opening statements in the Sarah Boone case, and I'll give you a little commentary about the Sarah Boone trial. And before we get to that, Michael, we do have some merch, don't we?
Yes, we do, in fact.
Where would we get that merch?
We'd go to clrbrucerivers.com.
clrbrucerivers.com for all your stop selfish snitching needs. And before we get to the opening statements, this is brought to you by our loyal sponsor, eforms.com. If you have a need for a legal form, go to eforms.com. Power of attorney, anything you need, like a bill of sale, rental agreement, any kind of legal form, you go to eforms.com. You used to have to go down to the street, and we had a company that would give you these forms. Now you can just get it online. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's not that expensive, and you can avoid the high cost of a lawyer to protect yourself in and out of court. So go to eforms.com. Okay, so let's talk about what is an opening statement. Opening statement is not argument. Might sound like argument. In fact, Michael, can we roll the clip from my cousin Vinny in his opening statement?
Everything that guy just said is bullshit. Thank you.
All right, so that's not an opening statement. He said everything that guy just said is bullshit. They do things in that movie that we would just love to do, but the movie's more realistic than you think it is. When the prosecutor objected, he objected because it's argument. But the idea of an opening statement is to showcase what you think as the lawyer the evidence is going to show. The evidence in this case will be X. On the cold and dark night, Sarah Boone was drunk, and the evidence will show that she was 0.16 at the time. And the evidence will show, and then they go through the evidence. And they try to showcase what the evidence is and what who the witnesses are that they're going to testify and what they're going to testify about. You don't say, everything that the prosecutor, the defense is going to come and say is X, Y, and Z. You don't give an argument. You save that for your closing remarks. So let's get into this. Let's just see what this is cold, so I haven't seen this. So make sure you got your popcorn. Make sure you got your glass of wine or whatever you got. Put your feet up. Let's take a look.
Through witnesses. With that, Mr. J, you may proceed, sir.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, what the evidence in this case is going to show you is that this defendant zipped Torres shot in a suitcase. She was able to do this because at the time of his death, he only weighed 103 pounds. And she did this with the malicious intent.
So obviously we can hardly hear what he's saying. And that's an issue because you want to have your argument heard. They can probably hear him a lot better than we can. But he's got a microphone and he should be, this whole business of getting up in front of the jury and getting close to them. In federal court, you can't do that. You have to have one hand on the podium at all times in federal court. And you got to stand at the podium. You don't get to walk up and down in front of the jury like they do in the movies.
Punish him. And then she went up to sleep and left him to take his final breaths on this earth alone. How many breaths those were, we don't know. The evidence is going to show that it was at least for about 15 minutes, because there's going to be 2 videos, that the defendant herself took of this event.
See how he starts off each, paragraph basically with the evidence is going to show.
The evidence is going to show George Torres is dead because in this defendant's judgment, he deserved it. Now, with conscious disregard for whether he lived or died, you will see.
So he's saying that the evidence is going to show that he died because of this defendant and her judgment at the time.
Now, with conscious disregard for whether he lived or died, you will see and hear these videos. What I expect you will hear from a video that began at 11:12 p.m., 45 seconds, on February 23rd, 2020, in Orange County, Florida.
4.5 years ago. So she's been in custody this whole time. And I remember Sarah is gone. She's on her 9th lawyer. 9th, 10th, and maybe 11th, depending upon who's at a counsel table. You don't get that many shots at this. And I just can't believe they let it go on this long. But the key piece of evidence in this case, the very key piece of evidence, is the video. I mean, you really don't need much more of a case than that.
So,
You.
Is a suitcase on the ground, face down, with the zippers facing the floor. You will hear Sarah, the defendant will say, "For everything you've done to me." Sarah.
For everything you've done to me.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
For everything you've done to me. Sarah. Fuck you. And then the defendant laughs. Sarah. Fuck you. And the defendant laughs.
The reason that's important is because what she tells the cops later.
Sarah. Stupid. Sarah. That's my name. Don't wear it out. Sarah. I can't fucking breathe, baby. Seriously. Yeah. That's what you do when you choke me. Sarah.
Sarah.
That's my name. Don't wear it out.
Sarah. I can't breathe, babe. Seriously.
Yeah, that's when you do when you choke me.
Sarah.
So it's not a defense that if he did this, something to her in the past, that she can now exact retribution. There is a thing about battered spouse syndrome, but that ain't it here.
Sarah. Sarah. The defendant laughs again. Sarah, I can't breathe, babe. She laughs again. That's on you. Sarah, I can't breathe. She laughs again.
And this is effective because he's going through this recording, and it is just so cold of her.
She laughs again. Words. And I would submit the evidence is going to show, because of the intoxication from alcohol, is the next thing she says. Sarah, I can't breathe, baby. That's what I feel like when you cheat on me. Sarah, fuck you. I can't fucking breathe, Sarah.
Sarah.
That's what I feel like when you ching on me.
Sarah. Please, Sarah.
Yeah.
You should probably shut the fuck up. Sarah. Shh. Is the last thing you will hear the defendant say to Mr. Torres.
You should probably shut up.
Sarah.
Shh.
As he is face down, zipped shut, in a suitcase.
These are bad facts. They are just and they're unarguable facts because they're on video. You can't argue with what she said. You can only argue with why she said what she said and why she did what she did. That's the only thing you can do here.
That, again, began at 11:12:45 and lasts just over 2 minutes. At 11:23 and 3 seconds p.m., there's a second 22-second video, and it's the defendant zooming in on the suitcase. And all you hear during this 22 seconds, after he's been in this suitcase since at least 11:12 p.m., is one more time, Sarah.
Sarah.
Very sympathetic. You got a guy begging for his life, and she is just cold as cold can be.
So can you tell them exactly how long he was in that suitcase while alive, as far as we can know from the video
I think
evidence?
it's like 15 minutes. I think he's.
How did we get to this point where 103-pound George Torres is put into this suitcase left to die? Well, the next morning, the defendant wakes up, late morning, perhaps early afternoon, somewhere in this time range, several hours later. And she doesn't see George anywhere, Mr. Torres, and eventually realizes, oh my God, he's in the suitcase. The first thing she does after taking him out, and I believe you will hear a description by the defendant saying, he took his little legs out. At some point she makes that statement. And tries to resuscitate him. Hears gurgling as she presses down on his 103-pound chest, forcing whatever air was trapped in there out and gurgling. And the next thing she does is she would call 911.
103 pounds, George Flores. Now, that's information I didn't know beforehand. I didn't realize he was such a small guy.
Forcing whatever air was trapped in there out and gurgling. And the next thing she does is she would call 911. She calls Brian Boone. Who's Brian Boone? Brian Boone is her ex-husband. They share a child in common. And this date, February 24th, 2020, is a Monday. A normal work day for most people. School day for their child that they share in common. But after they got divorced, the arrangement was every other week.
She calls her ex. Why did she call her ex? She doesn't call 911 first. What?
Oh, it was kind of maybe to have him there for the blame. I don't know. Yeah.
Arrangement was every other weekend, no co-parent. And that weekend included Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's that free schedule. And then Mondays and Tuesdays, their child would be her responsibility. And Wednesdays and Thursdays, their child would be Mr. Brian Boone's responsibility. So February 23rd, 2020 was a Sunday. And now we've led into Monday, 2020. Mr. Boone had been trying actually to contact the defendant several times that morning because he just wanted to confirm she was going to get their child after school that day. And there had been a history of...
But keep in mind, so that's her day to watch her son. And all of a sudden, her boyfriend is dead in a suitcase.
You will see in the phone record, he calls her and calls her and calls her. Then she finally calls him back instead of calling 911. And being the nice co-parent that he is, he comes over. It's a short drive, about 10 minutes. And as she's explaining to him what the heck is going on, he peeks in through the front door of her townhouse, which allows you a view all the way to the back sliding glass door. You're going to see that her kitchen is off to the right, but there's a doorway.
Sometimes, the whole person comes into play. So the fact that, she's doing what she's doing, knowing she has to parent her child later on, the fact that there have been reliability issues about whether to pick up the child or not, that all plays into the person's character. Character is really not supposed to be an issue of the defendant, but it always is. It always is.
You can see all the way through. And on the back side of the kitchen and the breakfast room area, there's tables and stuff. There's also some blue legs sticking out in view. Brian Boone says, check please. You need to call 911. He doesn't set foot into that townhouse. He does wait outside though, being the good co-parent that he has been. So now, after having first called her ex-husband, after having first waited for Brian Boone to come over, the defendant makes the 911 call.
Okay, so Brian comes over, and they still haven't called 911 yet.
What you will not hear are tears. You will not hear sorrow. You will hear a certain level of concern.
So the idea of calling 911 comes from her ex-husband to take care of her boyfriend.
What you will not hear are tears. You will not hear sorrow. You will hear a certain level of concern. My boyfriend and I were playing last night. Put him in a suitcase, and we were playing hide-and-seek kind of thing.
That never made sense to me. I put him in a suitcase, but I'm trying to find him. Does that make any sense to you?
I fell asleep. Found him dead in the suitcase this morning. I don't know what happened. He had blood coming out of his mouth. Don't know if it was an aneurysm. Pulled him out of the suitcase, tried to give him CPR. He was in the suitcase and I fell asleep. He's not awake. He's purple. He's not breathing. There's some instructions about how to do CPR given to her, asking about whether an AED is available to shock his heart. It's too late. He's cold, he's stiff, he's purple. We were playing hide and seek. We were playing hide and seek. This is horrible. This is horrific.
I'm going to hide you, and you're going to seek for your last breath. This is so fucking cold. And she has no clue when she's talking to the cops that she's recorded this on her phone. This has got to go in Dumbest Criminals analogs. I mean, just absolutely does.
This is horrific what happened. Like, what happened? We were playing hide and seek last night and I fell asleep. So she mentions that there was blood coming out of his mouth. And his body, like all bodies in suspicious deaths, was taken to the 9th District Medical Examiner's office and autopsy. What the doctor found was what you would expect after being left passed from positional asphyxiation, meaning like you're not going to get full breaths when you're crumpled up like an accordion, and environmental suffocation. You don't have to have a plastic bag over your head if you can't get the oxygen and the CO2 coming in and out of your environment. But she also did notice, yeah, he suffered from blunt force trauma on his torso, in his face, his mouth. She'll use words like contusion, will help her explain contusions and bruises. She'll use words like hematomas, will help her understand for you all that that means bleeding under the skin and blood, what you expect from a bruise, that's why they're running bruises. But he had all this additional trauma. He had trauma on his fingers as well.
So the hematomas he's talking about are evidence of other trauma. And that'll come into play in a little bit here.
So now, the Sheriff's Office, Orange County Fire Rescue show up. And the defendant interacts with the first patrol officer. You will see and hear that body-worn camera. It's more of the same of what we heard on the 911 call. He's like, hide and seek. It was good. I fell asleep. I don't know what happened. A few hours later, the detectives from the homicide unit in Orange County.
It's her statements to the cops that really do her in.
The Sheriff's Office approach her and are ready to interview her after doing some initial things, which includes grabbing her cell phone off of a counter that was found by the suitcase in Mr. Flores, and giving it to one of their digital forensic examiners, who we'll hear from later in the trial, from now on. But it's time to give the first interview with the defendant. So they do a first interview with the defendant in one of their unmarked detective patrol cars there on the scene. And the basics of this remain the same, but there's a little more elaboration, as you would expect from trained detectives versus getting the 911 call taken. But the basics of what the defendant tells them is we had wine, we painted, we drew, we did puzzles. The particular wine we had was a Chardonnay from the Woodbridge winery. The bottles, plural, are in the trash. We started about 4 p.m. after Mr. Torres went to the store. Puzzles, art, listening to music, enjoying each other's company. We were literally just enjoying one another's company. The other bottle of wine that was left over from Boer wasn't even half full, so the description she is saying is 1 bottle of wine and plus a fraction of a bottle of wine left over from the night before. Ladies and gentlemen, not all bottles of wine are made the same. Many of us may envision what you would expect at a restaurant. Those are 750s, 750 milliliters of that. Bottles of wine that were recovered from the defendant's trash can were 1.5 liters, so the equivalent of 2 standard.
So it's a big bottle of wine.
And, you know, they can also vary based on whether if you're at a party at Diddy's house, too.
Yeah, right.
So the equivalent of 2 standard bottles of wine. A 1.5 liter bottle of wine is 50 ounces. Given that a standard serving of wine is 5 ounces, you can begin to do the math. And there's receipts. The day before, Saturday, February 22nd, 2020, there is a receipt from Publix for a bottle of Woodbridge wine.
So it's this characterization, you know, her talking to the cops and telling, without her knowledge, that there's anything on her phone that really does her in. Any credibility that she has at the outset is destroyed.
Playing hide and seek. We were always trying to outdo each other where we could find each other the best.
How does this make any fucking sense if she's helping him get in the suitcase?
When they started playing hide and seek, she went up to the shower and then got tired of hanging out in the shower and came down, and that's when she found him playing around in the suitcase. We both thought it was funny. I'm going to zip you up. 2 little fingers could stick out. And she went upstairs thinking, he'll get out, we're going to have sex and go to sleep and call it a day. It was a good day. She insists that they had wine, but we're not drunk. You will be able to assess that for yourselves when you hear the recording she made. No ill will between us last night. Last argument.
You know, the medical examiner's office, well, I think she was tested, and her blood alcohol, I think, was 0.16.
Maybe last week. Don't really argue. We came home, drink, smoke, did art, listen to music, play with the dogs. We drink what we can afford. We used to be able to afford liquor, but now we can only afford wine. And that's how that day ends with the police. She goes and sleeps and stays at her ex-husband's house the night of February 24th and 25th. What they are doing, and by they I mean Orange County Sheriff's Office, in part, is going through her phone. That's when they discovered the two videos that I just described for you. And there's other things in the phone, which I will discuss with you in a little bit. But she's summoned in for another interview, and she sits down and gives another interview on February 25th, now Tuesday. She does describe past instances of violence. You're going to hear about that. She's going to say, Mr. Torres had hit her with a curtain rod about a month ago. Since then, though, like we've been...
One of the things about battered spouse syndrome is it's got to be so pervasive that it changes who you are as a person. You've got to feel under a constant threat, constant terror. It's got to be this real omnipotent threat of violence.
Good. I've been good. She describes that he comes at her all the time. He comes at me. So it's either I flee or I try to go upstairs and go to sleep. That's usually what it is. I don't know if you talk to Brian, her husband, about any of that, but most of the time I flee and I go over there. There's a discussion about why she stays with him, and you'll hear that for yourself. She will say that she doesn't really want to drink. She just takes an occasional drink. She drinks to placate him, Mr. Torres. She says that you're going to see phone videos of Mr. Torres smashing her TV in the past, like a month earlier. You may see that too.
It doesn't justify it. Him smashing her TV does nothing for them.
But she doesn't get drunk. When she drinks, she likes being non-compos mentis, her words, not mine, having her wits about herself. Then she gets to the hide and seek again and describes that they've played it 3 times before, but had never zipped one another shut in it before. And they were really just running out of places to hide because it's just a townhome. She does not remember, according to her, she does not remember taking any photos or videos of the night's events. At this point, he smashes her phone, punches her. It's the first time in her life she'd ever been punched, I expect the testimony to be. And he made her curl up in a fetal position on her own porch for 4 hours, and she was only able to escape this situation when he fell asleep. I expect that you're going to hear that Mr. Torres...
So these are bad facts for the prosecution. He made her curl up, he did this, he hit her, he smashed her TV. And so why is he bringing this up if these are bad facts? One of the things you do with bad facts, you deal with them straight away. You know, you don't hide from them. You say that even if these things are true, and let's assume that they are, it doesn't give her the legal excuse.
Is an alcoholic. I expect you may hear his high score on his blood alcohol level was a 3.42 once when he got treated at the hospital. This is a man who has serious alcohol problems, and I expect you're going to hear about that. Despite that first date, and this is going to tie into some other things that I expect could possibly come in. despite that first date, despite at that point in time of this first date not having a relationship, emotional ties, and the things that come along with a relationship that make it harder to break off a relationship, it's one thing to have a bad first date, it's another thing to end a 25-year marriage. Despite that first date, there's a second and a third. Now, these dates are at bars, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it just typically ends up, she's going to tell you, I suspect, or you're going to hear.
So he's basically saying there's a pattern here. There's a second and a third date. Despite the bad first date, she kept coming back, which is what a defense lawyer would do, you know, in reverse, if she's the victim.
Hear that she said, one way or another. It's one thing or the other. Like, I ask a dude for a cigarette, Mr. Torres flips out, and I'm going to pay the price. Just things like that. You're going to hear and potentially see, yes, there were injuries that the defendant is going to attribute to the victim causing her. Black eyes, cuts in the face, perhaps from the curtain rod incident that was mentioned in the police interview happening about a month before this. Bloody ear. A stab wound in the leg, which is perhaps described as sword fighting and playing around in medical evidence. But nonetheless, I suspect you're going to hear and see a lot about their past history. And at the end, if this occurs, if this comes in, the state is going to have the opportunity to take.
The nature and character of their relationship is relevant, and his past abuse is relevant because it's just part of the nature and character of their relationship. What the state's going to come down with is that she just didn't have a legal excuse. This isn't a battered spouse type of case, is what the state's saying.
Lead of the tour in this room labeled the defendant and the victim's past history. And I'm not going to go into that now. If this all comes to fruit, the blooms on the tree during the trial, we'll discuss it at the end where it's more appropriate. But I'm asking you to not rush to judgments until you hear all of the evidence in the case. And then apply whether or not these past instances have anything to do with what happened on February 23rd. Now, like a home inspector, there are experts to come in and kind of help walk everybody through this room labeled the defendant and the victim's past relationship. I suspect there's a chance you may hear from some experts, psychologists and psychiatrists, about battered spouse syndrome. The state is not challenging in any way that battered spouse syndrome exists. It's well recognized. The experts will tell you all about it. Not disputing that at all.
So basically he's saying they're not challenging the fact that battered spouse syndrome exists. And he's saying that you might be hearing from the defense witnesses talking about battered spouse syndrome. You have a battered spouse syndrome where the spouse will just flip and, you know, and just blow her husband away just because. And it might seem, you know, but after years and years and years of abuse, it has been a successful defense. The battered spouse syndrome is diminished capacity. You know, you did this because, you know, you were just abused all these years and you just lost your shit. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Where you have an imperfect battered spouse, you've got a situation where you're not quite there. It's not quite a legal excuse, but it's a mitigating factor. So you might be found guilty, but the sentence should be reduced because you were abused so badly. The problem that I have with that is she's so fucking callous and so cold in her video.
So there's both aggravating and mitigating factors potentially.
Potentially. Essentially, at the end of the day, the evidence is going to show that Miss Boone killed Mr. Torres and that there's no reasonable explanation for innocence.
Appreciate y'all being here. I was introduced before. My name is James.
You know, he's right up at the well of the courtroom, but right in front of the jury box. And the problem that I have with that is some jurors don't like that. You're invading their space. You have the taint of Boone on you when you're the defense lawyer. You just are. I remember I did a case, and the jury fucking hated my client. They just hated my client. And as I'm walking, just like this, walking up and down in front of the jury, this woman looks at me and just kind of goes like this, like get away from me. That's only happened to me once, but I knew, I mean, we won a couple of accounts, but lost the battle.
And I represent Sarah Boone, along with Tony Henderson and Kevin Beck. Now, this is going to be a several-day trial. Obviously, today, Tuesday, Wednesday, we're not sure, but trying to make arrangements for witnesses to find expert witnesses and whatnot, and we'll know more probably end of the day or Monday, so you can complain. But I know your focus is on this case because you took an oath to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no higher call than to write a will. No higher call than to write a will. And we're going to ask you to do this. To write this will. And find Sarah Boone not guilty. Because she was justified.
We're going to ask you to write the story and define. She was she was justified and forced to choose to defend herself, but that force was reasonable. Why? How was she in danger? Why didn't she call the fucking cops? Why did she go to bed? Why did she get shit-faced and recorded? Why did she say, "For all the things you've done to me"? Why did she say, "Fuck you"? Well, is that reasonable force? Is that her exercising her good judgment?
Between Sarah Boone and George Torres. Sarah Boone and George Torres were down and out, as you can be. Their life centered around alcohol. Both of them suffered from, used to be called alcoholism, now it's called alcohol abuse syndrome.
They're drunks. Let's just call a spade a spade. They're fucking drunks. Both of them.
So day to day, they struggle with the use of alcohol. You can imagine that. It affected their jobs. It affected keeping employment. It affected even getting a job. As codependent as you can be towards each other. And you're going to learn with all that was domestic violence. And that George Torres physically abused Sarah Boone. And she suffered from the effects, the psychological effects that one suffers from repeat violence from an intimate partner. They were together over 3 years.
3 years is not that long to be together to have this PTSD, but I don't want to, diminish somebody else's experience, but the callousness, she's talking about not only for everything you've done to me, but this is the way I feel when you cheat on me. I mean, cheating isn't physical violence.
And there were several prior incidences violence. We've got the photographs. There were incidences where police were called who took photographs. So you're going to be able to see the evidence. And we believe the court will instruct you at the end when you're considering self-defense, which we call justifiable use of non-deadly force or justifiable use of deadly force, that you can consider.
Here's what you have to do in a self-defense case. The defense has to move for self-defense. In other words, you have to notice, you say that we're going to rely on this defense of self-defense. Then it's an affirmative defense, which means that the defense has to make a showing. So the defense has to have some showing that this was self-defense. I think it's going to be awfully difficult to show in this case. So when he's running a risk here of saying this is a self-defense case and then not getting the self-defense instruction at the end of the case, if he gets the self-defense instruction, then the burden shifts to the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it wasn't self-defense. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of you have to prove a double negative. So the state has to prove that it wasn't self-defense. They have to disprove at least one element. But if the defense doesn't get the instruction, he's got no defense to it whatsoever.
That you can consider the prior acts, the history of violence, the prior difficulties that the parties had, and considering her set of circumstances that she was faced with in making the decision to use reasonable force under the circumstances.
Okay, I used reasonable force under the circumstances. What did she tell the cops that they were doing? Playing hide and seek. She never said that there was a dispute between them.
And the most important thing I can tell you here today is keep an open mind. There's two sides to every story. You're going to hear the state's side, them attempting to paint her a certain way.
The problem with the two sides to every story is this. The defense has no burden to prove anything. They do when they're proving an affirmative defense. But when you say there are two sides to every story, and all of a sudden you don't put up a story because all of a sudden your self-defense got taken away because there is no self-defense, then all of a sudden the jury's waiting to hear your side of the story, and you got shot down. So that's a real risk of pursuing that line.
As they've done here today in opening statement. And then you're going to hear another side. And you're going to have to weigh that. All the evidence, the credibility of the witnesses, the photographs, the video.
The presumption of innocence is the prism through which all evidence shall be viewed. And if you hear two stories, one consistent with guilt, one consistent with innocence, the presumption has not overborne, and you must acquit. How's that for cornball?
And come to a conclusion. Now let's talk about this day, February 23rd of 2020, the date of this event. This case has been pending for some time. Here we are, October of 2024. I think the evidence is going to show that they had purchased some wine the day before, but they hadn't finished all of that. So it was in the refrigerator. Many times that's how they start their day. At some point, you're going to see a video from Publix, from where they live. I believe it's Winter Park. But Publix was not too far from their apartment complex. And they took their car, they drove over there. So you're going to see a videotape from Publix of them both going in the store about noon, and they come out with one of these larger bottles of the wine, And then, of course, there's a receipt, and the bottles are in the garbage can.
Alcohol plays a part in this, but it's not a legal excuse.
Of course, there obviously is an attraction between the two. And as everybody knows, couples can have great times where things click, everybody gets along, and then we can have episodes of disagreement. And how are those resolved? Really, is what this is about. How are disagreements resolved? But George was very jealous of Sarah. And you're going to hear the testimony about that. And that he cannot, in certain situations, he can be very charming. But when his level of intoxication gets to a certain level, is when he gets sad, moody, and a lot of times eventually it involved forcible sex with Sarah Boone.
Oh, she was taken against her will.
Or actual physical violence against her. Art, they did that for a while. They both like puzzles, they did that for a while. Well, about 5 or so, the wine bottle was gone. And George had said, I want to go get some cigarettes. So there's a convenience store right close by their apartment complex, and Sarah thought he was just going to walk over there and get cigarettes and come back. But no, what he did was he got her keys, he got her debit card, and he went over to the Publix and he got another bottle. And I think that was about 5:30, something like that. And again, there'll be the Publix video showing him going in, going out, and there'll be a receipt for the purchase of that bottle, and then there'll be that bottle will be in the garbage can along with the other bottle.
All right, let's a little bit of information about our defense lawyer here. You know, he got his degree from Stanford University in Alabama. He was a prosecutor from 86 to 89. He's a public defender from 2009 to 2012. And he's practiced criminal defense for over 20 years. He's taken more than 100 cases to trial. And he sent a letter to Boone after seeing her self-drawn ad. Why would you do that? She's got no money. This is just doing it for publicity.
Well, when he comes in with the second bottle, Sarah knows. This is not good. She knows this means he's going to get to another level of intoxication. So, Sarah's concerned. So she attempts to placate him, keep him busy, keep him in a good mood. They drink that bottle. Well, she drinks as well. And at some point, they're intoxicated at a high level. As some people do when they're drunk, they get silly. And they...
So I have a rule of thumb. Generally, my opening statements are not that long, usually about 10 minutes. And we're not going to listen to this whole thing.
She goes upstairs, their bedroom's upstairs, to the shower, and waits for a period of time. And he doesn't come to her. At some point, she gets cold, she gets tired. She wants to go see, well, maybe we got it mixed up. Where is he? So she goes downstairs, and they had gotten a suitcase down a week or so ago. It's an old suitcase that they were going to donate to Helping Hands or Goodwill or somebody, and they were putting some items in there. And it's a broken down suitcase. It's a large suitcase. They both weigh about 100 pounds. And they don't eat good. Malnourished to a large degree.
5'4", 140 pounds, you're not malnourished. You're well fed.
The pull handle is broken off. And they've attached a little paper clip that's got the rubber around it. And that's how they hold it back and forth. Well, as she comes down the steps, she sees him getting in and settling in the suitcase. So she walks over there, and they see each other, they smile and laugh, and she zips him up. And she zips him up, and they laugh for a while.
Not for very long. Sarah, I can't breathe.
And they carry on. She sits on the couch. And at some point, he says, I can't breathe. Now, his face is facing the zipper, and she's got 2 or 3 inches that she's opened it. And she doesn't know. They're intoxicated. She doesn't know whether he's just saying that to try to get her to get him out or what. But he's a captive audience. Physically, they're the same size, but he's much stronger than her. If they got in a fist fight, he would win 100 times out of 100. But she's got him down. He claims he can't get up. He has to sit and listen. It's a unique form of physical restraint. And so
She's not in danger at this point, right? She could leave. She could do whatever she wants.
she lets him have it.
I don't know. This death, obviously, I just thought it was funny.
So one of the things that this lawyer has got a very tall hill to climb is that, she's already destroyed her credibility, because she lies to the officers. Or maybe she wasn't lying. Maybe she really thought that that's what happened, but really something different happened. Regardless, giving her the benefit of the doubt, he's got an uphill climb, and he's got an excuse for everything. He's got, and I don't mean to disparage Mr. Owens or whatever his name is, but the defense. But he's got an uphill battle. I mean, let's just face it. I mean, he's got an uphill battle. He wanted this case. I mean, he sent her a letter asking for this case. I could have gotten the case. Do I want a fucking loser, and have everybody say, hey, that's the guy that lost. I hate that. Anyway, we'll see you next time on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Make sure you subscribe. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. Sign up for Patreon. And you need to go to www.crbrucerivers.com for merch. I bought Christmas presents yesterday. So it's time. It's around the corner. And we're ready for you. So CLR Bruce Rivers. See you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Sign up for Patreon. Subscribe. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. See you next time. Criminal Lawyer Reacts.
Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away.
23-hour lockdown, police is at my god.